So I want to take a slightly different approach to this general topic of talking together and thinking more about science and the church. And when I was initially approaching this, I was thinking about it more from the essence of science, and in particular thinking more from my kind of background in primatology and psychology, and thinking when I'm talking about church here, I'm referring more to this idea of faith. But before I go into that and the kind of approach that I'm taking on that, I first wanted to draw your attention to my background and to see a bit more about where I'm coming from. So I am a primatologist. I work with monkeys and apes in Edinburgh Zoo and in the wild. And then I also work with young children from around about 4 up to 12 in both here in Edinburgh, the Lowlands and Fife, and also a bit further afield in populations where children there don't have any access to formal schooling, still live a very much a traditional way of living. And what I'm really interested in is social influences in their behaviour. So why they act in ways they do, and how do other individuals of their group or species, or even cross-species in the animals, interact with those behaviours. And through doing that and spending a lot of time in this area, I often come across some of these big topics that we mentioned: evolution, gender, stereotypes, social influences in general, conformity, majority biases, and things like that. But coming back more to the actual theme of this evening and this idea of science and the church. When I was initially looking at this and the best way to approach it, being a scientist, the first thing I was like, numbers. Let's look at the numbers. And from the Wellcome Trust Global Monitor report from 2018, they actually did report that about 61% of people globally say that religion is important in their daily lives. And this is obviously religions across the board. This isn't just Christianity, which would be my personal background, but also Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, all of these. But what I thought was even more interesting was that this report also showed that less than 3 in 10 people who identified with a religion, so that's again broad range of religion, so about 29% of them, say that science has never disagreed with their religious teaching. But what I'm really interested in is what about the other half of that, and those individuals who therefore perhaps said that it had agreed with them, and also those people that were on the fence, and those ones that were like, I'm still not sure. Now, a quick whirlwind through the history of science and faith, and they have a long, long history of being both in conflict, but also to an extent in harmony. If we go back and look at some of the great scientists who came up with a lot of these big ideas, a lot of them also did have a faith as well, and that we see played out in a lot of their writings as well as their approaches. So while we do have this history of conflict and harmony, and as we've just been hearing, these do vary from country to country. Again, we compare Western Europe in particular with the south of North America in particular, we might see some slightly differences depending on the area and the topics. But looking at this more from my own perspective and from my own studies of interacting with animals and young children and other scientists in this area, the thing that really struck me about this all is those common patterns between them. When I look at my faith and the study of behaviour in particular, I think there are very much commonalities that I take both to my approach of science and both in my approach to relationship with God. And I've tried to summarize them here for you. So these would be things like gathering evidence, and whereas in my line of work, that might be through making observations of the animals, or perhaps giving them a problem-solving task and looking to see who solves it first, and then how does that spread through the group, if it does. Or again, gathering evidence from reading the Bible, talking with other people, and that kind of element of community always comes into that. And then reporting those findings back, whether it's at a meeting like this, or whether it's in publications or things like that. And again, we see that within faith as well, with both theology and also even within the church, where you might have a minister perhaps, or someone who might report their findings from their study of the word. And then again, in both of them, we invite others to reproduce those findings. We invite others to check up on what we're doing, whether it's in science and get them to replicate our studies, or whether it's in the church where we ask people to go away and study the word and check what we're saying and those interpretations of them. And then asking questions. I think this is one of the biggest things that's come out in both my science and my faith. I still have a lot of questions from both reading the word, studying the word, looking into different aspects of the creation story, for example, of the interactions with the Israelites in the Old Testament, of Jesus and the disciples. Lots and lots and lots of questions there, and some of those that I might not get an answer to in this lifetime. But also thinking to my science, and like, I can go, and I'm terrible for doing this. I don't think people like going out with me too much to social gatherings, because I spend a lot of time observing people and being like, oh, look, so-and-so's interacting with this other individual. What does that tell us about their behaviour? I was in school just on Tuesday and was noting as the children came into the hall who was sitting with whom and why that might be. And you start to see that coming apart in that. So I think my parents would probably say that even from a young age, I've always been very much the why child and trying to find out more with a lot of those things. So I think we see that similarity again in both faith and science. And then also belief. I think there is a lot of belief involved in faith, why we believe the things we do, whether we believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ, the idea of the Holy Trinity with God, Father, Son, and Spirit. But also we sometimes see this in science. We see a lot of people, particularly when you're discussing with them about certain areas of science, it might be like, I believe in evolution. I believe in gravity. I believe in these certain aspects. And when you actually, again, go back to asking those questions and talking to them more about that, the source of those beliefs are also really interesting. And I think from them can then spark further discussion and investigation from that. And I wanted to show you some examples of how those similar patterns come out in both my work and in my journey with God. So one of the things I study is social learning. So this idea of learning from seeing it done. Or you might think of it in things like imitation, things like that, as you can see here. The father is holding his son up and the monkey is doing the same with their child. But what I want you to pay attention to is there's actually quite a lot going on in this figure, and we can break it down into three separate elements. That perhaps we might have an innovative event here. We don't know why this gentleman lifted up his child, but we're then also seeing this transmission now of information, where we're seeing that there's perhaps learning from the mother or the father in the young to imitate perhaps that behaviour. But also what's really interesting to me from a social perspective is, what about these other guys up the tree? They are seeing all this going on. What will they do next? Will we see this behaviour spread through the group? Will we then see this weird tradition that only exists in this one group of monkeys? When they see people, they all lift up their babies. What's going on there? How does that spread and develop into traditions and cultures? And what can we learn from that? And I'm also nearly out of time. So just looking again at how I apply that in my faith. So studying the word in particular. And in one way, as this became really apparent to me this year in particular, was thinking about both the Christmas and the Easter messages. And we hear the same scriptures read every single year, or we go back through them. But the nice thing about the richness of the text is that every year there's a new little snippet of information, and perhaps something that you haven't thought about before. And if I take the Easter message in particular, this year I was really drawn to the attention of the tree from what the wood came from that Jesus was crucified on, and just thinking more about that in the creation story and how when God created that tree and that tree came into existence, that he knew later on that the path for that tree would be the crucifixion of Christ, and just seeing how all these things often come together. So for me, science and faith help us to put things together, to learn more about the mechanism through science and then through faith about what they mean. And one of the nicest ways that I think I can help to summarize that is this idea that for me as a Christian, everything is created by God. He is the primary cause and he has revealed his purpose to us. But these are then recorded in the Bible, and we can then study that secondary cause in the physical forces, chemical interactions, the reactions, and those interactions of living organisms to find out how they shape life on Earth. So in essence, it's a bit like the study of an artist's painting or perhaps a sculptured stone. And the more I study those stones or that piece of artwork, the more I can learn about the creator behind them. So in essence, what I would argue is that that dialogue between science and the church is really important for me, because I learn more about God's creative character. And through exploring the world that God created, I'm hoping that I can, first of all, acknowledge him as the ultimate source of everything, but also it allows me then to even worship God through the study of that science, through the study of his creation. And that's it from me.